have poured substantial resources and investments into including the better use of technology to improving effectiveness of AML CFT measures. Last year's setting up of ACIP, led by MAS and CAD, a platform that combines law enforcement and regulatory insights with the industry's ground knowledge of business and clients, has helped expand our understanding of emerging risks and typologies. Many sectors have put in place the necessary laws to comply with AML CFT requirements, including lawyers, pawnbrokers, and moneylenders. Parliament passed the Serious Crime and Counter-Terrorism Miscellaneous Amendments Bill yesterday to provide for tougher penalties on corporations and professional services providers, as well as money mules for overseas organized syndicates. Therefore, the introduction of the Developers Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Bill is timely. The use of real estate to launder illicit funds is an established method of money laundering the world over. Large sums of illicit funds can be concealed and integrated into the legitimate economy through real estate. We've seen reports where millions of dollars worth of property have been subject to criminal investigation when they are suspected to be proceeds of illicit funds. Yet, these reported cases are likely to represent only the tip of the iceberg. It is therefore critical that we put safeguards in place in the real estate sector to stop it from being a channel for such activities. My comments on this bill will focus on effective implementation. The proposed bill puts in place requirements for developers to carry out customer due diligence, keep proper records, and report suspicious transactions. Whilst I strongly subscribe to taking an ecosystem approach to AML CFT effort, as we are only as strong as our weakest link, I share the industry concerns on practical limitations on some of the requirements. Developers are unsure how they can conclusively check and verify a purchaser's profile, as well as establish purpose of purchase and source of funds in the course of a sale and purchase transaction. As current rules on option to purchase and sale and purchase agreement only allow check, purchase order, cashier's order, or telegraphic transfer, funds flowing into the property sector would have already gone through AML and CFT checks by financial institutions before developers receive them. And the option to purchase is not transferable nor signable, and cash payment is not allowed without the explicit approval of controller of housings. So I would like to ask the Minister whether developers, as secondary recipients of such funds, can rely on the customer due diligence already carried out by financial institutions. Also, whether a risk-based approach can be adopted, where the levels of checks expected of developers vary according to whether the purchasers are local residents or foreigners, with enhanced checks prescribed for those from high-risk countries, and whether the checks required of other parties in the ecosystem, such as lawyers and real estate agents, can be coordinated so as to reduce duplication and ensure all efforts complement each other. Whilst the intent of the bill to stop financial crime in the real estate sector is laudable, we need to ensure the implementation of regulatory measures is not so onerous as to cause the increased cost of compliance to be passed to consumers. To check for suspicious persons and entities, developers need to screen their prospective purchases against multiple lists provided by relevant authorities, including the United Nations sanctions list. To assist developers, can the Ministry coordinate and compile a single comprehensive list online to ensure thorough screening against the most updated information? Under the new regulation, developers are required to appoint a compliance officer as guided by MAS notice. The industry is concerned about the availability of talent to fill such a role, as well as its related cost. Whilst I agree there is room to heighten awareness as well as institute measures to check for suspicious property transactions, this burden should not rest only on the shoulders of a compliance officer, but those also of the senior management and indeed throughout the organization. Developers should institute a corporate culture that has zero tolerance for money laundering and terrorist financing and have that communicated rigorously to all staff. Lessons learned from experiences of financial institutions should be shared widely so developers can shorten their learning curve in implementing AML-CFT measures. Mr. Deputy Speaker, real estate-related money laundering cases often involve sophisticated methods being deployed, making detection a challenge. I would like to ask the Minister how we can mitigate the risks brought on by the use of front companies, shell companies, and trust and company structures established domestically and offshore to purchase property. Such structures help distance the criminal from ownership, with control vested in the hands of third parties to avoid obvious links to true ownership. According to an article by Financial Times on how laundered money shapes London property market, about 100,000 properties in England and Wales are owned by overseas companies, with many of the properties having been bought by anonymous shell companies based in offshore tax havens. We are also subject to the risk of property values being manipulated by criminals, buying or selling real estate at prices above or below market value, and collude with others in the ecosystem to clean the money. One example is when properties are deliberately undervalued and illicit funds are used to pay the difference between the contract price and property's true value. Processes should be in place to question such unusual property price transactions. So my final point is to ask once again that genuine buyer of Singapore homes be protected from any increased cost of compliance by developers, which the introduction of this bill may inevitably cause. We can do that by adopting a calibrated risk-based approach. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I support the bill.